This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a run through the markets for you. Nigeria's main index is down by nearly 7% so far in the month of May. In fact, it hit its lowest point in the last 3 weeks today, 38,320 points. Of the bourses we track here, however, South Africa's JSE has the highest gains on a year-to-date basis, up about 11.3%. Bourses in Nigeria, Kenya and Egypt are 4.8%, 0.86% and 1% in the red over the same time frame. Naspers at the JSE was up by about 2%, well, just under it anyway. Main majors BHP and AngloGold Ashanti were down by 0.76 and 2.33%. respectively. Kenya's also started shipping out cargo from the Lamu port. One of the consignments out today was an 80-ton shipment of avocados from Kakuzi. That's destined for Marseille. Here's what's coming up tonight. South Africa's central bank holds its policy rate exactly where it is despite inflation rising. Egypt aims to start producing electric cars by the middle of 2022. And Colonial Pipeline Management confirms they did make a ransom payment after a cyber attack. Let's start in the world of monetary policy, specifically in South Africa, where the South African Reserve Bank once again decided to leave the policy rate, that's the repo rate, essentially unchanged at 3.5% in its MPC meeting. That decision was unanimous. The Reserve Bank last adjusted interest rates on the 23rd of July 2020 when they cut the policy rate by 25 basis points. The South African Reserve Bank's inflation outlook for the year is at 4%, still stable for low interest rates, although the outlook is showing some upside risks from higher food and fuel prices. The stronger rand, though, is certainly helping to offset higher inflation. It went under the 14 rand to the dollar mark today. The central bank also gave a very positive outlook for the economy, lifting its forecast for growth this year. It says the steady rate of vaccination in many countries has lifted forecasts for global economic growth, and that has boosted confidence significantly.
The economy is expected to grow by 4.2% in 2021. The stronger growth forecast reflects better sectoral growth performances and a more robust terms of trade in the first quarter of this year. Despite rising oil prices and a higher total import bill, commodity prices have risen to new highs, strengthening income gains to the economy. Household spending is also expected to be healthy this year, in line with less stringent lockdown restrictions and low interest rates.
Ethiopia's commodity exchange says it will introduce new products to its platform, including industrial items. At the moment, trading is restricted to agricultural produce, coffee, sesame seeds, wheat and maize. The agency that is helping at least 3 million farmers sell their products in an orderly manner now says it wants to encourage even more sectors to take advantage of opportunities that are presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area. CGTN's Coletta Njohi spoke to Bereket Meseret, the Chief Market Operation Officer at the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange.
Representatives of buyers and sellers of commodities strive to close lucrative deals. Two recently added specialities of beans are proving good for business.
So far, we have traded around 40,000 ton of different speckled and PGMB contracts, and having the launching of those contracts in recent periods, just like 5 or 6 months ago, the progress and the supply chain is responding to the marketing platform, both in terms of volume and quality as well.
Industrial products like cotton are under consideration for inclusion on the exchange, and there is now a deal for high-value items. The Ethiopia Commodity Exchange has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Mines and Petroleum to also introduce minerals into the trading, and this will include emerald, potash, tantalum, and sapphire, among other minerals. The idea is to establish an organized trading of the minerals and eliminate the need for brokers.
We will have industry consultation with the actors having the inputs on the industry consultation and best practices and benchmarks, both in local and international practice, will discuss on it, how it could be managed. Did the exchange can handle all the quality and standard compliance in by itself, or did it better to outsource with the third party or any other way around? All those issues will be addressed.
Coffee remains a top performer, with at least 600,000 metric tons having been sold in the past 10 months. These traders hope with more industrial products on the exchange, they will have a greater ability to export, especially to more African countries, and also further tap into the African Continental Free Trade Area that provides an available market of 1.3 billion people. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
We're still in East Africa, but let's focus over to Tanzania, where Uganda's President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni paid a one-day visit to Dar es Salaam on Thursday. President Museveni is the first head of state to visit Tanzania since President Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in on the 19th of March. His visit came after the two countries, or rather as the two countries, look forward to finalizing a crude oil pipeline deal. On the 11th of April, President Hassan visited Uganda, where they signed 3 key agreements to kick off the construction of the East African crude oil pipeline. The two countries signed a host government agreement, shareholder agreements and tariff agreements too. Now, partners in the pipeline agreement, Total and the China National Offshore Oil Corporation, or CNOC as it's more commonly known, also witnessed the signing of these agreements. Let's explore these developments in the hydrocarbons industry in East Africa in more detail. Abdul Samad Abdul Rahim is a co-founder and chair at the Association of Tanzania Oil and Gas. He joins us from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania tonight. So let's start with the funding side of this entire project. Do we know where the money is coming from for constructing this pipeline and at what cost?
A very good evening. Sorry, I cannot hear properly, so maybe you might need to tune in a little bit.
Do we know who's funding the construction of the pipeline and at what cost?
So as you all know that this project is very close to $4 billion. It will be obviously funded by a mixture of shareholders' equity as well as the debt raised on international markets. So there is plenty of appetite for that.
But there is an ongoing campaign, is there not, targeting banks and telling them that they should not invest in this pipeline, given the environmental damage being done by fossil fuels. Given that campaign, isn't it likely that banks will shy away from providing debt financing for this pipeline?
As you know, I'm not an expert on such matters, but with regards to the environmental, as you mentioned, let me be very clear that Total and the partners, CNOC, have undertaken a rigorous and very thorough environmental and social assessment, as well as mitigation strategies for this project. So there were studies which were done in the past. They also conducted a very detailed, what we call it, biodiversity, and involved social impact for local communities. So, but again, every human being and the people have the right to express their concerns and to raise their issues. But as for the funding part, there are a multitude of different banks in the world with different outlook and policies. There remains liquidity, of course, in the market for the project of this type of magnitude, which create, of course, a significant in-country value.
Okay, so just again, to just go back to that funding question, because it's extremely important to getting this project off the ground. In the event that banks say no, isn't it feasible that perhaps Tanzania and Uganda might consider raising the debt on their own, putting the debt on the public balance sheet in order to essentially get it off the ground?
As I mentioned before, when it comes to the funding itself, when you look at the magnitude of this project, of course, it requires multiple of stakeholders involved. But I can guarantee you that there are funders already in place, and the EACO project has. Otherwise, if they didn't have the funding, they would not have gone to the market and, of course, signed the deal for host government agreement, which today we have witnessed the final part of the host government agreement. So these are the steps that needs to be taken by any investors.
You've said
in terms of the funding, they are.
You've said there are funders in place. Do we know who they are?
I'm not in position to speak on what you call it, the investors' behalf, and I'm not obviously an expert. But it would be prudent and important for probably yourself to speak to them directly. But all I know is what has been publicly and put on public domain, but also expressed to the leaders of the United Republic of Tanzania and Uganda today and previously.
All right, one last question for you, sir. As I understand it, the tariff agreement that Tanzania set up will see the country charging just under $13 per barrel of crude transported through the line. Is that a fixed number regardless of whatever the price of crude is at, or are there ways or triggers that will essentially vary that price?
It's actually $12.7 per barrel. And yes, it is fixed per barrel shipped. And to be very clear, this tariff will be paid by the Ugandan shippers, or what we call it, the Ugandan oil produced in Uganda to the EACOP.
So essentially it would be paid by the project operators, for lack of a better word. CNOOC and Total will be the ones paying that tariff to Tanzania.
That is right. That's part of the joint venture partners.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Abdul Samad Abdul Rahim, co-founder and chair of the Association of Tanzania Oil and Gas, joining us there live from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Thank you for your time. Time now for a run through some company headlines. Let's start in the world of retail. Woolworths says it expects headline earnings per share to be more than 20% higher for the year to end June 2021. That comes as it benefits from a much better cost structure for its Australian operations, as well as improved trading conditions. For the 6 months ending in December last year, Woolies reported a 19% increase in profit. Its revenue is up 5% to about $3 billion. Woolworths' share price has almost doubled to its current level of $3.77. That's after slumping below $2 during the hard lockdown imposed last year in South Africa. The Australian carrier Qantas has announced new cost-cutting measures to help it deal with the impact of the pandemic. The plans include a 2-year wage freeze, slashing travel agents' commissions for international flights, and offering voluntary redundancies to cabin crew in its international business. Qantas also expects to report an annual loss before tax of more than $1.5 billion. It says its international division is losing roughly $2.3 million a week. That's down from $3.9 million last month. Jaguar Land Rover owner Tata Motors has announced a quarterly loss of more than $1 billion. That came as the Indian company wrote off $2.1 billion related to the revamp of the UK-based luxury car maker. The group has also warned that the current global semiconductor shortage is impacting production plans for this quarter. For the quarter that ended on the 31st of March, Tata Motors reported a net loss of just over $1 billion compared to analysts' expectation of a profit of $365 million. And the US tech giant Amazon has announced plans to hire 10,000 more permanent staff in the UK as online shopping continues to boom amidst the pandemic. The new UK jobs will include roles at 4 new warehouses, as well as roles at Amazon's corporate offices in London, Manchester, Edinburgh and Cambridge. It will also include positions in Amazon Web Services, which is the company's cloud computing business. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Tunisia's unemployment rate rises to 17.8% in Q1. And Nigeria extends a scheme for diaspora remittances indefinitely as it seeks to draw in a lot more US dollars.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. On to Kenya now. President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has formally opened the new port in Lamu. That facility will eventually have 32 berths once it's fully completed. The first phase of the project, however, consists of 3 berths. The project is being constructed by China Communications Construction Company. The Lamu port, located along Kenya's coastline, is part of the government's key infrastructure projects under Vision 2030. It's also part of the broader interconnected set of transport links, the Lamu Port South Sudan Ethiopia transport corridor, better known as LAPSET. On to North Africa now. Tunisia's unemployment rate has gone up to 17.8% in the first quarter of the year. That's according to figures released by the National Institute of Statistics. The number of unemployed persons for the quarter stands at roughly 743,000. That's compared to 725,000 unemployed persons in Q4 2020. For the details, here's Adnan Chouachi.
Protests continue in many regions across Tunisia. There are more than 750,000 unemployed youths, including 250,000 university graduates. They are urging the authorities to reveal its roadmap for tackling unemployment and the weak economy in the North African country.
The government does not seem to care about youths. We're fed up because there are no real job opportunities. There's no hope and no life without work and dignity. There's no concrete roadmap for tackling unemployment in Tunisia.
President of the Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights explained that the spread of unemployment and poverty among Tunisian youths has pushed thousands to flee the country. In fact, irregular migration is on the rise from Tunisia to Europe since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Uptick in irregular migration from Tunisia is worrying since last November. Most of these desperate people are unemployed youth who are looking for better opportunities overseas. At least 12,000 irregular migrants reached Italian shores in 2020. More are coming, while some 12,000 more were arrested by the Tunisian Coast Guard and prevented from crossing the Mediterranean.
Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi noted that his government believes in employment recovery in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. He also urged the private sector to contribute to job creation.
It's true that the job market is facing a crisis and that our youths cannot find opportunities. However, we're trying to give hope to the unemployed people through training and private initiatives. Tunisia is facing an economic and social crisis, which has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, we're still confident that the economy will revive and jobs will be created.
According to the National Institute of Statistics in Tunisia, the unemployment rate among men increased by 0.6 points to 15%, while for women the rate decreased by 1.1 points to 23.8% in the first quarter of 2021. The unemployment rate among the youth hit 40.8%, 40.4% among men, and 41.6% among women. According to the IMF, the economic shock in Africa was felt more dramatically than elsewhere, since the African economy is highly dependent on foreign trade. Experts say Africa's financing needs are estimated at $400 billion. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Still in North Africa, Egypt aims to start producing a fully electric car by the middle of next year. Public Enterprise Minister Hisham Tawfiq said following his tour of the headquarters of the state-run El Nasr Automotive Manufacturing Company, which plans to produce a first made-in-Egypt electric cars. The firm's annual production capacity is expected to hit at least 25,000 EVs a year.
Preparations are continuing to produce electric cars for the first time in Egypt. It's a partnership between Egypt's state-owned Al Nasr Automotive Company and China's Dongfeng Motors.
The future is for electric cars. When we talk electric cars, we talk China, because China has a very advanced position in the global market, especially for producing the lithium-ion batteries. China has something close to 50% of the production of EV cars, so went to a Chinese company, one of the big four. The company will help us rehabilitate our plant, which is in good shape, and rehabilitate with the target of producing 25,000 cars per shift. And we'll start, of course, with one shift, and if things develop well, we can go to another shift for a maximum of 50,000 cars.
Production will include 50% local components. To encourage Egyptians to purchase electric cars, each will be sold at a competitive price of $19,000, with low interest rate loans for those who need financing and up to $3,000 discounts for taxis.
This could be a turning point for the future of the vehicle market in Egypt. If the project succeeds, other companies, private and public, will start locally producing electric and hybrid cars too, making use of the research and development unit to be established by the government for this purpose.
Work has begun on other elements of the project as well. The government is also preparing the infrastructure for electric cars, such as building electrical charging stations, whether in fuel stations, at malls, in housing complexes, or even in parks around the country, to be able to have access to these charging stations by the car owners. The initial plan is to have about 3,000 charging stations in the first phase. Electric car production is expected to benefit the economy and Egyptians.
The feeder industries will witness an expansion and will gain experience in a new domain, especially that the deal entails that local components in the car will reach 85% in the future. This project will also provide employment opportunities, whether direct employment at Al Nassar Automotive Company or indirect jobs at the feeder plants.
The electric cars production is part of a comprehensive plan by the government to increase dependency on renewable energy, according to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Over in West Africa, Nigeria's central bank has extended indefinitely its Naira for Dollar scheme that targets diaspora remittances. It was introduced a few months ago. As CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam now explains, the scheme was set up to try and attract a lot more foreign currency to flow into Africa's biggest economy. Nigeria has been heavily affected by the pandemic and a decline in oil revenue.
Businessman Idris Abdullahi is one of many Nigerians cashing in on the central bank's Naira for Dollar scheme. He's a recipient of diaspora remittances. Friends and family who live abroad send money to their loved ones through his domiciliary account. Idris has earned well over $600 since the Naira for Dollar initiative took off.
A very good experience so far. Well, it's a welcome idea, and who doesn't want more money? Personally, I've been talking to more friends to see if they can talk to people they have back there so that, so that I'll get more money.
Nigeria's central bank launched the Naira for Dollar scheme in March this year, an incentive to boost foreign earnings by encouraging official forex transactions. The scheme was scheduled to end May 8th, but the Apex Bank has announced an indefinite extension, meaning people can continue earning 5 Naira reward on every dollar received through international money transfer channels.
Because of our heavily dependent economy status, most of the things that the FMCGs, that's fast-moving consumer goods that we can produce, most of them we import, and then some of them we, the raw materials are imported. So there's a heavy demand for dollars, for forex, by manufacturers. Nigeria as a country needs to explore other avenues for forex. The first of them that come to mind is the ease of doing business. We need to increase our processes. We're talking about regulations. We're talking about contract enforcement.
Diaspora remittances is Nigeria's second major foreign exchange source after crude oil. According to the World Bank, The inflow dropped from $23.55 billion in 2019 to $17.2 billion in 2020, a reflection of the impact caused by COVID-19 on income of Nigerians living abroad. Experts believe that while the Naira for Dollars scheme will improve forex earnings, the government would need to prioritize diversifying forex earning sources. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Interpol recently announced that it was creating a new cybercrime operations unit to boost the capacity of at least 49 countries in Africa to deal with cybercrime. One of those countries is Nigeria, where the level of cyber-related criminal activities is among the highest in the world. The announcement by the international police body comes at a time when authorities in Nigeria are also stepping up their fight against cybercrime. Here's CGTN's Deja Badmus with that story.
If there's one thing that keeps Nigeria's anti-graft body busier these days, it is internet fraudsters. Hardly does a week goes by without the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, announcing massive arrests.
In the last 1 month alone, we have arrested like 300 cyber criminals across the Federation. It is something that I'm particularly worried about.
Despite the best efforts of the EFCC, the rate of cybercrime in the country is still on the rise. The number of cyber criminals, locally known as Yahoo boys, is increasing, and they are becoming more daring in their criminal activities. African security think tank, the Institute for Security Studies, ISS, estimates that commercial banks in Nigeria lost a cumulative $39 million to cybercrime in 2018 alone.
Law enforcement and the judicial system is one of the key reasons why cybercrime continues to grow across the country. When people commit crime and there are no consequences for the crime, they continue to commit that crime. We are not doing enough when it comes to the legal framework to deal with some of this crime.
Nigeria's cybercrime law prescribes a fine of $25,000 or a 5-year jail term for hackers if found guilty. But the country's snail-paced justice system makes justice delivery inefficient. In February this year, the government launched what it calls the National Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy, aimed at strengthening cybersecurity governance and coordination. Experts say Interpol's new cybercrime initiative could serve as an additional boost.
This new policy creates a more robust approach where a center can coordinate everything that needs to be done when it comes to cyber infrastructure, cyber security and national infrastructure. So having Interpol here and also working with the government, I think it's a plus for us. And we, like I said, we need every help we can get at this time.
The EFCC is at the very heart of Nigeria's fight against cybercrime. And other than arresting and prosecuting cyber criminals, it is also using moral appeal to get young people off cybercrime.
As a young man, I'm appealing to all young Nigerians to desist from this, cybercrime activities. It is bringing bad image to our country. It is giving bad name to our country. It is also, chasing away a lot of foreign investment that we need.
For now, the appeal to morality doesn't seem to be having the desired effect. The community of cyber criminals in the country is growing. The EFCC certainly has its work cut out. DJ Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's on the other side. EU member states agreed to reopen the bloc's borders to fully vaccinated travellers. And we'll explore how residents of Shanghai are starting to adapt to a central bank-backed digital currency.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. Let's recap some of the stories making your headlines at this hour, starting in Zimbabwe. Well, authorities over there have confirmed several cases of the COVID-19 variant first reported in India. The government over there has now directed that all visitors from the Asian country will have to be quarantined upon arrival. Elsewhere, the Malawian Health Ministry says it has destroyed close to 20,000 AstraZeneca vaccine doses sourced from the COVAX facility. The vaccines are said to have expired 18 days after their arrival in the southern African nation. The Malawian health officials, while incinerating the jab, said it's against government policy to administer expired drugs to citizens. The manufacturers, that's the Serum Institute of India, has so far declined to comment on the matter. And health experts do worry that public skepticism about taking the relatively small number of doses that African countries have battled to procure could prolong a pandemic that's already killed more than 3.3 million people around the world. So-called vaccine hesitancy is a global phenomenon. France and the US are struggling with it, and skepticism is on the rise in some Asian countries like Japan as well. And the European Union and Spain say that the continent collectively will not be intimidated after some 8,000 migrants rushed into the enclave of Ceuta on Monday. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez vowed to restore order, as he put it, after this surge, and he said that some 4,800 migrants had been sent back. The influx comes amidst the backdrop of tensions between Morocco and Spain over the latest decision to provide medical treatment for the leader of the Western Sahara independence movement, the Polisario Front. He had been seriously ill with COVID-19. That's a run through your headlines. Colonial Pipeline has confirmed that it did pay a ransom of $4.4 million to the cybercriminal gang responsible for taking that key U.S. fuel pipeline offline. The company's management authorized the payment mainly due to the uncertainty over how long the shutdown would continue. The 8,900 long pipeline carries the equivalent of 2.5 million barrels of crude a day. Well, in fuel terms, it supplies roughly 45% of the East Coast supply of diesel, petrol, and jet fuel. The U.S. government has recommended in the past that companies do not pay criminals over ransomware attacks, since that essentially would provide a strong incentive for these hacks to continue in the future. Colonial Pipeline took itself offline on Friday, the 7th of May, after the cyber attack. In return for the payment, which was made in Bitcoin, the company received a decryption tool so it could unlock the systems compromised by the hackers, although that was not enough to fully restart its systems immediately. Also, the founder of TikTok owner, the parent company of TikTok, ByteDance, Jiang Zemin, has declared his planned departure as CEO of the tech giant. In a memo to employees, he said that he will be succeeded by human resource chief Liang Rubo, whom he called an invaluable partner. He said that decision came as a result of months of deliberation, citing his managerial skills and his personal preference for solitary activities. Jiang added he would work with his successor over the next 6 months in a bid to ensure a smooth transition takes place. And the move represents the biggest corporate shake-up at ByteDance since its establishment back in 2012. The company since then become an enormous social media force. It employs roughly 100,000 people around the world. EU member states have agreed to reopen the bloc's borders to travellers who've been fully vaccinated against COVID. In a meeting in Brussels, they also agreed to raise the threshold for declaring a country unsafe. But the new rules will still exclude travellers from much of the world who are yet to be vaccinated. And the EU has yet to agree as well on a common health certificate that allows people to travel more freely within the Union. More talks are scheduled for Thursday, with tourism-dependent countries, like Portugal for example, desperate to free up travel before the summer season starts. Non-essential travel into the EU from all but a handful of countries has been banned for the better part of a year now. Over in France, people can now sit outside a cafe or a restaurant as the next stage of the government's reopening kicks in. The nationwide curfew will also be relaxed. It will start at 9 p.m. local time instead of 7. Here's Ross Cullen with the latest from Paris.
I'm here in central Paris, coming to a cafe to do something I haven't done for 6 months, sit down at a terrace and have some food and drink outside. From the 19th of May, the government has relaxed the restrictions on cafes and bars, and they can now open their outdoor terraces for the first time since the second lockdown came in October 2020. Also, on Wednesday, I'm able to remove my face mask. It's obligatory to wear them outside in France if you are at a terrace sitting down to have some food and drink. But it's not just the national cuisine, that kind of symbolic terrace which has been affected positively by the moves the government has made this Wednesday. It's also cultural venues. Their restrictions are being eased as well. You can now go to a museum, a gallery, a cinema or a theatre, although the total capacity of visitors that will be allowed is governed by the specific floor size of the particular venue, and non-essential shops are also opening from the 19th of May. Also taking place this Wednesday, another restriction being eased is the curfew. A nationwide curfew has been in place in some form or other in France since the middle of December. It's currently 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's going to be loosened starting on Wednesday evening at 9 p.m, allowing people more time to spend some time outside with their friends for the first time since October 2020. The government is hoping for a successful strategy of loosening restrictions to go alongside its vaccination programme. More than 20 million people, that's more than a third of the French population, have received at least one COVID-19 vaccination so far. The government's next target is to have given a first vaccination to at least 30 million people by the middle of next month. And June also marks the next stage of the government's reopening strategy, when you will be able to eat inside a cafe, bar or restaurant, and also the curfew will be eased even further if the health situation allows. And crucially, for the tourist season, the government hopes to be able to open its borders to non-essential tourism. Ross Cullen, CGTN, at a cafe here in Paris.
Back into China, the Chinese currency, the yuan, has been consistently taking a larger share of global payments this year. According to global payment services company SWIFT, China's currency, the yuan, or as it's formerly known, the renminbi, reached a historic high of 2.5% of total payments between China and the rest of the world in March. That's before coming down to 1.95% last month. Now, the overall share in 2020 was largely below 2%. In the meantime, the International Monetary Fund also says the share of US dollar reserves held by central banks fell to slightly under 60%. That's the lowest level in 25 years in the fourth quarter of 2020. Now, for some analysts, they argue that that partly reflects the declining role of the US dollar in the global economy in the face of competition from other currencies used by central banks for international transactions. China, Russia, Brazil and Turkey have been steadily reducing their holdings of US Treasury bonds in the past few years. Still in China, it's one of the country's key pilots for the digital renminbi. This is essentially a central bank-backed digital currency. From hospitals to shopping malls, metro stations, residents of Shanghai are now saying they're starting to get used to the country's official digital currency. Here's Ying Junyi with this report.
After 3 months of renovation, Jing'an District's Zhenying Wet Market introduced a smart system for real-time data management of things like food traceability and safety. The most recent addition to the setup has been a digital yuan payment system for the merchants there, the first of its kind in the city. Many local residents are finding it easier to use than they thought it might be.
I applied for the digital RMB using an invitation link from my friends who work for banks, and I got the app download after 2 days.
The city is now partnering with 6 commercial banks to explore the use of the digital yuan.
There's no charge fee for digital renminbi payment, so it's better for us compared to other digital payments. The merchants will be the main driver promoting its use.
And there's no need for digital renminbi users to worry about security risks. Experts say digital renminbi payments will have the strongest security available in any digital payment system.
Alipay and WeChat Pay have their own cryptography frameworks linked to the merchants' systems. Digital renminbi payments will be even safer as the whole payment system is cryptographic.
To further promote the digital renminbi, participating banks will be offering users off-currency discounts and cash bonuses on public transport payments during now and the end of June. Ying Junyi, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
On to India now. The country reported over 276,000 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours. The number of deaths went up by nearly 4,000. That is, nearly two-thirds of people tested showed exposure to COVID-19. India's infection tally now stands at 25.77 million. The death toll is over 287,000, according to government data. Over 3 million patients diagnosed with COVID-19 are still being treated. A large portion of them have to stay at home and get medications themselves because hospitals are simply overwhelmed at this point. The prices of some drugs have also been rising due to supply shortages.
We don't have any of the doctor-prescribed medications. The suppliers told us they're out of stock, but we have no idea if they are being honest or they're just hoarding. The patients are suffering.
To meet domestic demand for COVID-19 treatment, the Indian government has suspended or set limits on some drug and vaccine exports while tackling black market and hoarding by middlemen. It has caused concerns that the situation in India could disrupt global medicine supply chains. In fact, India is the third largest drug producer in terms of volume, and it supplies nearly half of the vaccine market globally. For example, the country is responsible for 40 to 70% of World Health Organization's demand for BCG vaccines. They are shots for pertussis, diphtheria, and tetanus. India also supports 90% of global demand for vaccines that treat measles. Indian pharma products are exported to more than 200 countries in the world, with the U.S. being the key market. BBC earlier this month reported that about 60 countries, mostly in Africa, are faced with COVID-19 vaccine shortages because of the reduced supplies from India. Neighboring countries, including Bangladesh and Nepal, have reportedly stopped new vaccination registrations in the past 2 months as a result. Gao Songya, CGTN.
This pandemic has caused a profound shift in how we work. For many, the switch to remote working was a success, and the idea of going back to the office every day of the week seems pretty absurd at this point, doesn't it? Companies are becoming a lot more open to the idea of less in-person office time, but that in turn is raising even more questions about the future of office space. Here's Karina Huber taking up the argument.
New York was the first major U.S. city to get pummeled by the pandemic. Millions of New Yorkers fled, countless stores and restaurants went out of business, and revenue for the city dropped dramatically. Some declared New York was dead and would be for a long time. But more than a year later, it's coming back to life. Traffic is up, the tourists are back, restaurants are filling up again. What's less certain is whether workers will return to the office in person.
A number of companies have been surveying their people on their comfort with coming back to the office. The main population who are looking to return back are people who either live in the city, where they can walk or cycle to work, or younger people.
But many employees like working from home. Employers are more flexible now. Numerous studies show that in many cases, remote work didn't negatively impact productivity.
Employers were pleasantly surprised with the productivity, with the output, the way workers embraced new ways of working and technology.
Several industries, including banking and tech, are open to the idea of working from home, at least part-time. Luke Camperman of Veldhoven & Company, that advises companies on working environments, believes post-pandemic, employees will come back to the office, but only 2 to 3 days a week instead of 5. He says this raises many questions about how workspaces will look and function.
What are then the activities that are happening in the office? Build an office that supports those activities, and that will be way more collaborative activities and team activities than just purely individual, rows of desks.
Fewer workers may be coming into the city to work, but some are betting big on office space in New York. In August, Facebook signed a lease for this nearly 68,000 square meter building known as the Farley Building, which was once the main post office here in Manhattan. The company says it will convert the space into a hub for its tech and engineering teams. The purchase came as a bit of a surprise. Months earlier, Facebook announced that within 10 years, roughly half of its employees will likely work from home. Facebook did reportedly get a substantial discount, about $100 million, to sign the lease. In the current environment, it's concessions like this that might be necessary for landlords to lure companies back into the office. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
Back across the Atlantic now, London's museums have been allowed to open their doors to the public once again. But as Nawi Jabahil now reports from the city, the shadow of this pandemic still looms large over the sector.
It may not look like much, but this is actually older than the Earth. This meteorite was the first fall to be recovered in the UK in more than 30 years, and it's part of a new exhibition that the Natural History Museum is hoping will bring back the crowds.
It's been challenging, but it's been a fun challenge getting ready for the reopening.
As part of the latest lockdown easing measures, theatres and museums have been allowed to reopen in most of the UK after what's been a stop-start year.
This area of London is home to some of the world's biggest museums, but because of COVID-enforced closures, they're all losing out on key sources of revenue, from ticket sales to shops and even venue hire, which is why they'll be eager to get their doors open once again.
Entrance is free at the Natural History Museum, but 50% of revenue comes from visitor-related income. Safety precautions will mean guests will need to wear masks and socially distance, but many seem excited to return.
I just love the museums here, and I've really missed them not being open. Yeah. I come here all the time, basically.
Just the fact of going somewhere with people and interacting with people normally again just excites us, obviously.
I'm a mum, I've got 3 young children, we live locally, and yeah, they're a really big part of our lives.
There are concerns that financial pressures as a result of COVID-19 may force many smaller museums in the UK to shut for good. Even for the major players like the NHM, visitor numbers will be restricted and international travel remains largely grounded. More than 60% of visitors here came from abroad before the pandemic, and that will take time to recover.
I think inevitably there will be some changes, but we are an internationally visited location. I think people will always appreciate seeing things in person, getting to touch things in person. So I think the museums will always have that to offer, and that will be something that I think people will really value, especially after the past year.
As museums in the UK reopen, the overwhelming feeling is one of relief. But like so much of our lives, the impact of COVID-19 is likely to be felt here for some time to come. Nawi Jabakil, CGTN, London.
Plant-based meat alternatives are becoming increasingly popular, even in China, with some leading fast food chains launching their first products over the past year. But now competition in that space is heating up, including in Shanghai, where some restaurants have now started to offer these meat alternatives. Chen Tong finds out whether Chinese consumers, though, are ready to adopt that trend in What's Hot tonight.
These steamed buns look no different from any other, but the usual meat filling inside is actually made of soybeans. Diners say they taste pretty much the same as real meat, and some say they are even better.
They taste good and smell great. They've got a bit of a meaty taste.
The smell is good, but not as greasy as real meat.
The plant-based buns are priced a little higher than the meat-based ones. But after debuting in January, sales in this vegetarian restaurant in Shanghai now account for more than 10% of all products on the menu.
We sell more than 500 a day. The people who buy them are young customers, vegetarians, and people who are willing to try new things.
Plant-based meat is not a new thing in China, but over the past year, it's made big inroads into fast food chains in the form of burgers and nuggets. And in this Chinese restaurant, the plant-based dumplings and buns on offer mark the start of the vigorous veggie invasion of China's traditionally meat-craving market. Brokerage firm TF Securities predict
The total value of the global plant-based meat market will reach some $28 billion in 2025, doubling the figure in 2019. Competition is already fierce, but promoting plant-based meat in Chinese cuisine means charting a new direction in the China market.
We launched plant-based dumplings at first, then spring rolls and buns. It's a new category, so a new racing track. It's also a new concept for consumers. We hope to attract Chinese consumers by launching plant-based products for Chinese tastes.
It seems too good to be true, but there are still many challenges ahead. A report from research firm Mintel shows only 12% of consumers surveyed have eaten plant-based meat in the last 6 months, whereas 68% of consumers have eaten red meat at least once a week during the same period. And the penetration rate is even lower in smaller cities.
That's probably because of the low accessibility and the very tough shift to change their consumption habits in these less developed regions. But we don't think it's a doomsday for the plant-based meat because over 2/3 of consumers are willing to try such innovative meat as long as it has a similar texture and flavor to the animal meat.
One of the most well-known plant-based meat manufacturers, Beyond Meat, saw net deficits of more than $27 million in the first quarter of 2021. But that cannot stop other players' active efforts in China. Shanghai-based Orient Group, for example, has announced it will put plant-based meat into massive production in the third quarter this year. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
Good run through commodity prices. We're going to be focusing on metals mostly. Platinum's up about 12.7% so far in the year. Palladium also notched a comparable gain over the period, up about 17% to just under $2,860 an ounce on the spot market. Copper contracts in London did close, fall by nearly 4% off news of a bit of oversight in China, designed to stamp out what authorities there describe as unreasonable price increases. The price of steel rebar was down 6% earlier on in Shanghai. Brent's decline today adds to oil's fall so far in May, down 1.76% at about 15.35 GMT. Here's what's coming up next. Still to come, we'll showcase a Nigerian business model that's spreading its wings worldwide.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Nigeria is taking one of its more successful business models to the world. This particular idea is named after the Igbo pattern of business mentoring, and it's a model that essentially promotes unpaid apprenticeship. It's proven to be responsible for the widespread prosperity among entrepreneurs in eastern Nigeria. With that story, here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam on Grassroots.
Businessman Oliver Omeke has one of the most successful furniture and interior design businesses in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. He's got more than 4 outlets to his name, housing a wide range of home and office furniture. He learned his business dexterity as a teenage apprentice over 3 decades ago. Having served for 9 years without pay, Oliver's boss finally set up a business for him in 2004. Now Oliver's company has been booming. He's using the same business model to raise a new generation of successful entrepreneurs.
We train you not only economically, but we train you morally. Depending on the number of years the person has spent, you will not leave the person to go empty-handed. You have to give some little help, the last 3 people I settled, I have to get a shop. I have to rent shops for them in Use Market. After renting the shop, I also decorated the shop. I gave one of them 4.5 million to start, which is reasonable.
Celestine Henry is one of over 50 youths serving and learning under Oliver. He's been here for over 3 years and is looking forward to his own settlement.
It's been interesting because we learn a lot and we're exposed to many things. I'm expecting that after my stay here, I'll still be able to raise other people.
Although novel to the Western world, this business model adopted by Oliver has been prospering the Southeast Igbo people. It's an unpaid period of business internship where an intern understudies business ethics from an established entrepreneur. Depending on the type of trade, internship tenure could span between 2 to 10 years. Business expert Ndubisi Ekekwe is pushing for the globalization of this business model.
Umunnama in Igbo means good brethren. In other words, you are looking at an economic system that works for everybody, not just for one person. It's more of saying, I will relinquish my market share so that other people will have opportunity in the market.
It's particularly significant in an economy like Nigeria, where unemployment rate is at 33.3%.
It's an organic equilibrium point where there is no input from any government, but communities and people are actually making it possible. So the human normal economics has helped significantly by providing a trajectory for people to get into where they can participate in economic systems, and that is employment.
The Umuneoma apprenticeship system has no government involvement. It remains a core tenet of the southeastern Igbo people. Its shared prosperity philosophy has seen many escape from poverty, and experts believe it could be a viable option for economic development and growth. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
A run through the currencies as we wrap up the program. The Naira crossing over 4.11 to the dollar yet again, getting relatively close actually to its weakest level in 2021, 4.1120 I believe. The CBN does have a tight stranglehold on the currency, and the currency has been eased by roughly 3.33% to the dollar so far in the year. The rand also strengthened to its strongest level so far in the year, just under 14 rand to the dollar, clawing back almost 5% against the greenback. As mentioned earlier in the hour, South Africa's central bank opted to leave the repo rate unchanged at 3.5%, even though rate hikes of up to 25 basis points are still on the table somewhere in the future. Bitcoin was 9.25% higher just before 15:30 GMT, before going back essentially to early mid-February levels. Ethereum also staged a bit of a rally, up 15.6% at the same time. But so far in the month of May, Bitcoin is down by about 28%, Ethereum more or less flat. That's where we leave this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.